Is this the dagger?
What's up, guys? Welcome to the On the Ball podcast NBA Draft Special. I'm your host, Pranav Sriraman, joined by my co-hosts Will Laughlin, Thomas Stapleton, Christian DeBlock, and our special NBA Draft Insider, Aiden Maher. Guys, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing excellently. Getting ready for one of the more exciting shows we're about to have right here on the On the Ball podcast. Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic, back home and ready to talk some hoops. It's draft season, it's trade season, it's free agency. It's all going to happen in like the span of a few days. So it's amazing.
For sure.
Yeah, we had a lot of good stuff today, some crazy trades, probably some more coming in the future, but ready for the draft Wednesday. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Aiden, what about you?
I'm just ready for the it's been way.
So with that being said, we are entering one of the more busier weeks of the NBA season. We've already had multiple trades going on today. We'll break all of that down on Friday's episode, guys. We haven't forgotten. We'll get to all of that. But today is the draft special. Essentially, what we're going to do is kind of like a draft before the draft. Essentially, all of us are GMs right here. 5 GMs of multiple different franchises, and we are going to be making picks for these franchises. It's not going to be what you see on Wednesday night, but it's what we believe should happen. So, with that being said, Christian, you're on the clock with the number 1 pick. Who are you selecting for the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Cool. All right, so at number 1, I'm going to select LaMelo Ball. The reasoning behind this is there is a couple other options, I believe. You can maybe go with Anthony Edwards. There is some ideas that maybe Killian Hayes is the best point guard in this draft. I think that maybe is possible, and even if they did, there was some rumors that maybe they would go get Ben Simmons and trade this pick away. But for me, I would select the 6'7" point guard. I think there's a lot he can offer to the Minnesota Timberwolves now and in the future. He really fits in with that offense, and I think they're going to really play a really run-and-gun kind of system in the way that would really benefit him. While he does have his issues defensively, I think the instincts and the ability he's a pretty good rebounder from a 6'7" guard position. We saw that in the NBL last year, so that's really good for me to see. I think his shot selection has been poor at times, which could have an effect on his shooting percentage, definitely in his rookie season, but I think he'll develop over time. His shot selection should improve. And alongside D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, I think he could be a really good fit for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So I got him at 1.
So with the number 1 pick underway, we are going to get to the number 2 pick. And I guess I'm on the clock right now. So, Will, would you do the honors?
All right, well, with the second pick, the Golden State Warriors select
Onyeka Okongwu out of USC. Now, it's highly unlikely that in the actual NBA draft, Onyeka Okongwu is going to be selected with the second pick. And possibly the Warriors could trade down for him. But in this draft, in our On the Ball podcast draft, this is who I'm taking at number 2. Listen, I think he is going to have a better career than James Wiseman. And what the Warriors need most is a big that's also a versatile big. He can guard, switch effectively on defense, guard the pick and roll. And quite frankly, James Wiseman doesn't do that. Everyone's on this James Wiseman hype train. But Onyeka can do a lot of the same things James Wiseman does. Maybe not as polished on the offensive end, but that's not what the Warriors require right now. They require the best defensive big, and that, I believe, is Onyeka Okongwu, and he has to be the pick for Golden State at number 2.
With the third overall pick, the Charlotte Hornets are going to take Anthony Edwards, a bruising scorer out of Georgia. I think this makes the most sense for them. Charlotte is just in need of everything, pretty much. They need everything, and I think Anthony Edwards, while he can't necessarily bring everything, I think his ability to score from everywhere on the floor is incredible, and I think it's going to help the Hornets right away. And I think eventually down the line, hopefully he can tap into that defensive upside that he has. He's very lackluster defensively at Georgia, but he's 6'5", he's 230 pounds. When he was locked in, it was tough to get a bucket on him. I think this makes the most sense for them because, again, they really just need anything and everything because their team they were the 10th seed, but they may be the worst 10th seed I've ever seen in my life. They just have a terrible roster, and I just think they need the best player available, and I think they can get that with Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, so with the fourth pick in the 2020 NBA draft, the Chicago Bulls will select Denny Avedija. And yeah, the reason I'm going with Denny is really just from a fit and talent perspective. I mean, I think Denny's a top 5 prospect in the draft, but regardless, fit-wise, it just makes perfect sense with the Chicago Bulls because they already have a backcourt. You know, they drafted Colby White last year, so they're not going to trade him away just yet. You want to see what you have with him, especially with their young core. You have front court in Wendell Carter and Lauri Markkanen, and you obviously have, Zach LaVine, who had like an all-star caliber season and put up pretty great numbers from scoring basketball-wise. And so Denny, not only are you getting a wing, a small forward, because you don't really have Otto Porter, but Otto Porter is not really going to fit into the Bulls' long-term plans. And this is a team that has promise for the future. Otto Porter is not going to fit into that, but Denny can absolutely do that. And you don't really have a pure playmaker on that team. Colby White, yeah, he can play make, but that's not really his forte. That's not really what he does best. And Zach LaVine obviously is not playmaking at all. So you really need a playmaker, and you can get that in Denny Avedija. So I just think it's the perfect fit. And talent-wise, I think he's top 5. The Bulls have the 4th pick, and I see no reason why the Bulls shouldn't draft Denny if he's available at 4.
With the 5th pick in the draft, I'm going to have the Cleveland Cavaliers taking Devin Vasel here. I think there's a couple guys that are better than him on the board, but he's still one of the top talents, and I think he fits with what they're trying to do well. At worst, you're getting a high-end 3-and-D guy. He's a great defender, great shooter, and at his ceiling, he's a guy who can create his own shot and create for his teammates as well. I would like a big man here, but I just don't really trust them with Poku, and I just see James Wiseman as a reach if they were to go for a guy like that. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Devin Vasel here.
With the 6th overall pick, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting Tyrese Haliburton out of Iowa State. I think he's a perfect complement alongside with Trae Young. He can shoot the ball effectively. I know the form is a little bit weird. He's a good playmaker, a secondary playmaker alongside Trae Young. He's good off the ball, and he can spell for Trae Young on the defensive side of the court. He's not the best defender in the class by any means, but he can hold his own on the defensive end. And we already know what Trae Young is on the defensive end. He's atrocious. So I think when you draft Tyrese Haliburton, you have a guy who can make up for some of the weaknesses Trae Young does, while you already have Trae Young who makes up for the weaknesses Tyrese Haliburton does, which is creating off the dribble and doing things like that. So I think Tyrese Haliburton will fit right in with the Atlanta Hawks.
With the 7th pick in the draft, the Detroit Pistons get the steal of the draft in Killian Hayes. Detroit is one of those weird teams where they don't really have any talent. And I kind of feel like I don't know if they necessarily want to play it safe here. I know this is a draft full of a ton of risk, but honestly, I feel like Killian Hayes is one of those top prospects with a ton of upside, but doesn't really have that much risk. I don't feel as though he has the risk of a LaMelo Ball or an Anthony Edwards. Killian Hayes is my number 2 prospect on my board, and I think it makes a ton of sense for Detroit. They're in dire need of a franchise point guard. Killian Hayes can be that franchise point guard. He can create off the dribble. He can shoot. He can make plays for his teammates. He even can defend pretty well. I think Detroit needs to swing for the fences because I really don't know how they're going to go forward from here. I don't really trust their drafting ability, and I don't think they're that smart of a team, to be quite honest with you. And I think Killian Hayes provides a lot of things that they need, and they can look to build around him for the next upcoming years.
With the 8th pick in the NBA draft, I have the New York Knicks selecting Isaac Okoro. I would have loved Killian Hayes as a Knicks fan personally. Not particularly high on Obi Toppin for our system, which is another guy I was thinking of. But Isaac Okoro from Auburn, I think the Knicks are in desperate need of a 3. Kevin Knox hasn't particularly worked out. They have guys like Reggie Bullock. There's some speculations that maybe this team goes all in for a guy like Russell Westbrook. I personally don't love it. But Isaac Okoro is a guy that could guard 2 to 3 different positions, which the Knicks seems to be that under Tom Thibodeau, they're going to like to play a lot of good defense. So that would offer a lot for Tom Thibodeau. Whether he can turn into a really good offensive player, that'll be a good question. I hope he can maybe be a solid guy who can attack the rim and do that as well. But with the Knicks, I will take Isaac Okoro.
Yeah, so with the 9th pick in the NBA draft, the Washington Wizards will select James Wiseman. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't think he was going to be available here. I was expecting Onyeka at this pick. But, look, the bottom line is the Wizards, they have a backcourt, John Wall and Bradley Beal right now. And they have at center, they have Thomas Bryant, who's cool, but Thomas Bryant, he can come off the bench. The Washington Wizards, they need a big man. Thomas Bryant isn't good enough to where that's like, we'll just pass on a big man who can be a really good player in the NBA just because we have Thomas Bryant. So the Wizards are going to draft James Wiseman, and I think he's a great fit, because they already have, a couple of solid wings and a Rui Hachimura. So they don't really need a player like Obi Toppin because I don't think that would be a very good fit. But James Wiseman will. I mean, we've seen athletically, he's insane. And athletic players historically can thrive with a John Wall. So it's a good fit there. He's obviously a lob threat, pick and roll with John Wall should be very effective. And it's a player that can potentially break out and have a lot of upside. So I think getting him at 9 is very good value for the Wizards. And it'll help them, elevate their team now, but also help them in the future as well.
With the 10th pick in the draft, I'm going to have the Phoenix Suns taking Tyrell Terry, point guard out of Stanford here. Now, they just acquired Chris Paul, obviously, but they're backup point guards. They frankly don't really have a reliable one. And they don't have one for the future either. Now, I don't adore the fit here. But with that being said, I think Tyrell Terry is one of the better talents in this class. I think this is great value here at 10. And I think he's going to be able to develop under Chris Paul, which is going to help him. He can come off the bench in his first year or two under Chris Paul, learn from Chris Paul, and then him and Devin Booker can be the franchise point guard if he develops correctly. And I think he will. He's a safe prospect, and I think he's got potential to be an all-star player potentially one day. Again, that's the key word there, potential. But the one question would be the defense there, but I think this is just get best player available, at least in my opinion, and it gives them a backup point guard with potential to be their starting point guard in the future.
With the 11th pick, the San Antonio Spurs select Patrick Williams. Now, if you just look at the stats for Patrick Williams, 9 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, you're not going to be too impressed. But with Patrick Williams, you're not drafting him for what he was at Florida State. You're drafting him because he's 6'8", 225 pounds. He's an extremely versatile defender. He's strong. He can guard multiple positions. And offensively, he's shown stuff that a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people really like. That's why he's been soaring up draft boards. He has shown an ability to create off the dribble, especially from the mid-range. I've seen a lot of plays where he'll take the ball, he'll drive into the mid-range, and he'll rise up over defenders. He's also a pretty decent three-point shooter. He's not the most consistent yet, but he also shot 84% from the foul line, which is a good indicator for shooting success. And he just continuously improved they're down the stretch of the year, I should say. So Patrick Williams is he's a project. He's a guy that you're going to have to work on for a couple of years. He's someone that's likely not going to contribute to the Spurs' success for a couple of seasons. But the Spurs are entering rebuild mode. DeMar DeRozan is likely gone. LaMarcus Aldridge is likely gone. They are embracing the youth movement. And what's another project guy who played really, really good defense that had raw upside offensively? Kawhi Leonard. I'm not saying Patrick Williams is the next Kawhi Leonard. That would be ridiculous. But I think there are some similarities, and I think the Spurs see that with Patrick Williams. And in a draft like this, I think Patrick Williams is one of the more safe gambles. And I think he's a great fit in San Antonio.
Yeah, so with the 12th pick in the NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings will select Obi Toppin. Look, I'm not in love with Obi Toppin, but I think at 12, it's a good pick, especially for a Kings team that, let's face it, Buddy Hield is likely gone, whether it's this offseason, whatever. Just future-wise, he's gone. I mean, he's already shown some disdain for the franchise in general. And look, say what you will about Obi Toppin, his defensive struggles, and he's not going to project to be a very good defender, but offensively, he's an electric player, and he's a very just marketable player. And the Kings just need guys who can be, faces of franchise kind of guys. And Obi Toppin has the potential to just be an electric kind of player, a highlight reel kind of guy, especially with a De'Aaron Fox in the backcourt. And the Kings don't really have a player at that position or in a mold of Obi Toppin. If they can get Marvin Bagley healthy, I don't think Marvin Bagley and Obi Toppin front court is necessarily going to conflict too much. It's not necessarily a perfect fit, but I don't really think it's a terrible fit either. I mean, defensively, it's not great. But let's face it, the Kings, they just need someone who's going to put up some solid counting numbers. I think Obi Toppin, if he's in the right situation, I think he's a Rookie of the Year candidate just because he can put up all these highlights and just a lot of counting numbers. And offensively, he's just could be a beast. So I think it's a good pick here for the Kings. Good value at 12.
With the 13th pick in the NBA draft, I have the New Orleans Pelicans taking Aaron Naismith from Vanderbilt. It's incredible that he shot 52% from the three-point line at 8.2 attempts last year. So he will definitely fit into an offense that likes to really run and gun. I don't think he'll necessarily start, especially with all the guys they have. I would expect them to re-sign Brendan Ingram. So they have a really good offense, a really good core, and I think he would add to that. 23 points per game last season for Vanderbilt, which is pretty remarkable. 6'6", so pretty good size as well. I think that's a great pick to go even farther and make this team even more potent offensively, to be quite honest with you. So I think that's good value at 13 for a team that's going to be running and hoping to make the playoffs next season.
With the 14th, whose pick is it? My bad.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
If you can go ahead if you want.
Okay, so with the 14th pick in the 2020 NBA draft, the Boston Celtics, it's going to be a battle between them and the Pels, who just took Naismith, but let's assume Naismith is gone. The Boston Celtics will select Jalen Smith. Now, this isn't the best prospect available, but he fits what the Boston Celtics need, which is someone like a Miles Turner in his aspect where he could rim protect, he could stretch the floor, he could do a little bit of everything as a big man. And I think the Boston Celtics, it's not going to be the most talented guy available, but right now their roster is pretty much complete besides the center position. The center position's always been a position of conflict or a position of need ever since Al Horford left. That's the one piece they're really missing from taking that next step. And I think Jalen Smith could develop into a really serviceable center for them, a guy who can rim protect, stretch the floor a little bit. I think that's all they need at the center position in the modern NBA. While you have Tatum, Brown operating in the wings, their defense is already really good without a rim protector. So I think adding Jalen Smith would be a perfect fit into that Boston Celtics lineup.
With the 15th pick in the draft, I have the Orlando Magic taking Tyrese Maxey. Now, I feel as if Aleksej Pokusevski and Kyra Lewis are both better prospects here, and I did go back and forth on Maxey and Lewis, but I ultimately went with Maxey. He's just going to be able to come in and step in right away and make an impact for this team. The Magic need, and I can't stress this enough, they need to draft a guard here. Like, if they draft another big man, I really don't know what to say to Magic fans. They have my consent to change teams. Like, if they draft another big man, that's ridiculous. So, Kyra Lewis, yes, I don't think Markelle Fultz is a franchise point guard, but I feel like Tyrese Maxey is just a little bit better fit right now, and I think he's going to be able to come in and make an immediate impact. I know he's only shot 29% from three, but the shooting potential is definitely there. He's just a do-it-all shooting guard, and he's going to be able to pair really well with Jonathan Isaac on the perimeter defensively. Those guys are going to be locking down opposing offenses on the perimeter. So if I'm an Orlando Magic fan, I'm excited about this pick.
Yeah, so with the 16th pick, the Portland Trail Blazers will select Saddiq Bey. Look, the Blazers, I think they're definitely could use really an all-around and a very well-rounded player like Saddiq Bey, who's both NBA ready and projects to be very, obviously, have pretty high upside as well. And to get him at 16 is just the perfect situation. The Blazers, they have pretty interesting front court situation, with Zach Collins and Nurkic and Whiteside. So they don't really need a front court player at all. That just makes it way too cluttered, in my opinion. And then backcourt, obviously, they have CJ McCollum and Dame. So they really need just a wing, like a 3. And that's what Saddiq Bey is. And he's overall just a well-rounded player. He can defend very well. There's not too many, big gaping holes in his game. You can nitpick definitely some stuff, but overall he just does a lot of things very well. And he'll be a good player, whether he's probably going to come off the bench starting off, but we'll see if they re-sign Melo or not. But overall he could definitely be the starting small forward for them in the future. So Saddiq Bey at 16.
With the 17th pick in the NBA draft, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves with their second pick taking Precious Ashiwara, sorry, I can pronounce the name. But 6'9" forward.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there you go. 6'9" forward. I think they're going to have to improve that power forward position to have another guy that can play alongside Karl-Anthony Towns. They do need to get better defensively, which we've mentioned on previous shows. So that is important for them. He did average almost 2 blocks a game for Memphis last year, almost 11 rebounds per game. So he's definitely going to be a presence alongside Towns. The question is, will he start for them if they do take him? I think they would probably start him. I think that offers another dynamic to that team that could have them be one of the better teams, especially if they take LaMelo Ball as well. So with that pick, I have them taking the power forward position.
So at pick 18, I have the Mavericks selecting Paul Reed. Now, a guy like Opoku probably will turn out to be a better NBA player, sure. But right now, the Mavericks are contenders, and they don't really have the time to mess around with experiments. They need guys who could fit in immediately. And I think Paul Reed is exactly what they need. He can guard 1 through 4. He has great defensive versatility. Obviously, we saw what they did on the offensive end last season. They were one of the best offenses of all time from that standpoint. But their defense was just atrocious from pretty much every metric. And they don't really have great perimeter defense. Maybe if Kristaps Porzingis can regain some of his strength back, he's also coming off a torn meniscus, so his injury load might add up. So the rim protection might not necessarily be there with Kristaps Porzingis, but with Paul Reed, you're getting a guy who could guard at least 1 through 4, and I think that's exactly what the Mavericks need at this current situation.
With the 19th pick, the Brooklyn Nets are going to select Desmond Bain, a senior out of TCU who really just does it all. It's just the ultimate glue guy. He's a great three-point shooter, shot 44%. Doesn't have the, picture-perfect form or anything like that, but 44% from 3, that's all I really need to hear. He's a pretty solid defender as well, so right away I think he's going to be able to step in and be a great 3-and-D wing for whatever team that drafts him. But he goes much further than that. He's actually one of the best off-ball passers in this draft. He's a really good passer. I really like some of the stuff that I've seen out of the pick and roll. He can kick it out to shooters in the corner. He's a really good passer. Overall, he's just a high IQ player who doesn't really have a ton of flaws outside of his athleticism and just makes winning play after winning play. And I think the Nets, who are likely going to be in championship contention next year, really need a guy like that, really need a guy that can step in and play some minutes if Harden is tired, if Kyrie is tired, if Durant is tired, and give them some valuable minutes. And I think that's exactly what Desmond Bain can provide.
With the 20th pick in the draft, I have the Miami Heat taking Kyra Lewis. This pained me that Poku is sitting here at 20. He's 6th on my big board, and he is sitting here at 20. That would be great value, and the Heat would turn him into a great player. But they just don't need a big man. You've got Bam Adebayo. What do you need here is a point guard. Kendrick Nunn, he was great in his rookie season. He broke out of nowhere, but he's not a franchise point guard. Kyra Lewis, I'm not going to the extent to say he's going to be a franchise point guard, but he's going to be a really solid one, and he's going to be better than Kendrick Nunn. Especially, you look at what is his weakness. It's really just he needs to build up strength. He needs to get a little more explosive, which comes with that strength, get a little more vertical, and just patch out some other areas. And I think the Heat are going to be able to do that. He's going to be a really well-rounded point guard. And again, that's just what they need. It pains me not to take Poku here, but just from a fit standpoint and from a value standpoint, Kyra's still a great pick at 20.
With the 21st pick in the NBA draft, I have the Philadelphia 76ers taking Isaiah Joe out of Arkansas. We've said this on multiple occasions. This team is desperate for shooting, and he is definitely one of the best shooters available at this point with all the guys that were previously taken. They, for some reason, they find ways to find value out of shooters back at the end of the draft. We saw Landry Shamet a couple years ago before they traded him, of course. He was taken 25th. So I think this is a spot where they can find a guy who shot 41% from three. So he will offer them that shooting off the bench. And I think that's important for them because we've seen with their offense, that is the key if they're going to be successful, especially in the East where they're going to have a chance to maybe be a top 6 team. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. But I have Isaiah Joe going to the Philadelphia 76ers.
So it pains me to say that my Oklahoma City Thunder will not have a chance to draft him. The Denver Nuggets have the 22nd pick, and they are going to draft Alexei Pokusevski, however you say his name. Listen, guys, I know they're contenders right now, but you know what the Denver Nuggets front office is notorious for? Taking risks. They took Michael Porter Jr. coming off a back injury. They took a Serbian dude named Nikola Jokic during a Taco Bell ad. They take risks. That's what they do. And right now, they're going to take a calculated risk by taking the guy with the most potential left on the draft board. If it doesn't pan out, guess what? They're still contenders and one of the brightest teams in the future. If it does pan out, great for them. They're probably even further on the contenders list. It's low risk, high reward with Poku to the Nuggets, and I think this is a perfect pick for them. The fact that he's available right now this far into the draft says a lot, and I think when the Denver Nuggets are in a position to take this risk, which not many other teams can't say they're in a similar position. So I think the Nuggets have to take Poku here. It's a risk, and they're good at taking risks, and it's panned out before.
Who's that 23?
With the 23rd pick, Thomas, who are you taking?
Who's on the clock? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, Thomas. You're on the clock.
Yeah, I know what team. Sorry,
Utah,
I didn't realize.
the Jazz.
Yeah.
The Utah Jazz. Ooh, this is a tough one. But with the 23rd pick in the draft, the Utah Jazz are going to select Dan Oturu out of Minnesota. Now, I'm a big fan of Daniel Oturu. I think this is a guy that averaged 20 and 12 in college in his sophomore year and just really has a lot of – is probably the most polished back to the basket big in this entire class. He's a dominant low post threat. He's a developing shooter. He shot 37% from three, and he's really only improved. I mean, if you look at his combine numbers, they were absolutely ridiculous. He's a really good mid-range shooter. And then defensively, he's not great right now. I can't lie. But he's 6'10" with a near 7'4" wingspan. He's extremely athletic, and he's not actually as some of these guys in this class just get burned by off of pick and rolls. But Oturu isn't as bad as some of these other guys. And I think that Utah can look at his athletic frame and just look at all of the skill he has. And with Rudy Gobert, the future is uncertain. I think it has to be uncertain, and I don't know if they want to pay him the super max long term. So I think Daniel Oturu makes a ton of sense as a skilled big that you can pair next to Donovan Mitchell for the next upcoming years.
So, Aiden, who are you taking at 24?
With the 24th pick in the draft, I'm going to have the Milwaukee Bucks selecting Jaden McDaniels here. Now, here's where I'm in a predicament because the Milwaukee Bucks would never make a pick like this because they want to try and get a guy who can make an immediate impact, right? They want to prove to Giannis this is why you should stay. But I have been an advocator that he's going to leave. And whoever you select with the 24th pick, whether you go out and get an immediate impact guy like an Xavier Tillman or whoever, that's not going to really change much. So I'm going to go ahead and take Jaden McDaniels here, a guy for the future. Now, this may upset Giannis, but I already think he's going to leave, even if you select that immediate impact guy. And Jaden McDaniels, I mean, he's a development. He's definitely a big risk reward type of guy, but I don't see anybody on the Bucks current roster, any young guys that really stand out to me as, that can be a franchise cornerstone. Now, I'm not calling Jaden McDaniels a franchise cornerstone, but he can definitely be a really good second option at his ceiling. And if he pans out, that's the thing. He's big boomer bust, and the Bucks would never make this pick, but I think Giannis is going to leave either way. So I'm going to take Jaden McDaniels here.
Outside of Giannis, you know who else is in pain? Me, because that was going to be my pick. But with the 25th pick in the draft, the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to select Teo Maladon, a French point guard who is actually one of the most accomplished pro players in this draft. Now, he's not getting a ton of coverage, but that's fine because Maladon is extremely skilled, and I don't really care about coverage, to be quite frank. He is an extremely skilled passer. He's one of the best and most underrated playmakers in this draft. And I think the Thunder are kind of in need of a great playmaker, and that's what Maladon can be if everything works out. He's also a developing shooter. He shot 36% from three, has a high free throw percentage, great touch around the basket. I have faith that he'll be able to be a good three-point shooter in the future. As for his scoring upside, I'm not completely sure how high it is, but if he's able to maximize his ball handling, maximize his crafty finishing ability, and just really develop as a three-point shooter and potentially a guy that can be knocked down, I think that's a pretty legitimate offensive threat as someone who can score from three, can finish inside, and can make plays for his teammates. And then defensively, he's not particularly athletic, but he's 6'4" with a near 6'10" wingspan. He's extremely long. He plays hard on that end of the court. And you know who he's mentored by? Another great French point guard named Tony Parker. I'm not saying Teo Maladon is going to be the next Tony Parker. But what I am saying is that there are some resemblance, and from all accounts, he's an extremely hard worker who's been rising on a lot of draft boards. And I think with OKC, they need a playmaker. They need a guy that they can pair with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and I think Teo Maladon can be that guy.
Will, who are you taking at 26?
Who's picking at 26?
The Boston Celtics are on the clock.
Boston Celtics? Okay. So with this 26th pick, Boston Celtics are going to select Killian Tilly. This is a player that is going really underrated by the mainstream media, I think, but it's mainly just because of his injury. It kind of held him back. But I still see some potential. And the Celtics, they very well may trade this pick, if we're being honest, because they have so many picks. But if they do end up drafting, I think they'll draft Killian Tilly just because, look, I mean, he's a power forward, obviously excellent. He's a really good three-point shooter already. He's pretty underrated in terms of just his overall shot creating. His post-game is actually a lot more advanced than you would think. And honestly, his vision, his playmaking ability is pretty solid for a big. So again, he doesn't have too many glaring holes. Defensively, he's not excellent, but he has pretty high IQ when it comes to defense and offense. So as long as he can stay healthy, I think he'll be a solid player coming off the Celtics bench.
With the 27th pick, with the 27th pick in the NBA draft, I have Trey Jones from Duke coming to the Knicks. It seems like he's always the guy that a lot of people are talking about as a point guard that a lot of these contending teams like the Lakers and stuff prior have been interested in. So I think the Knicks will take him here. They don't really have a lot of security at that point guard position. We don't really know. They might trade for Russell Westbrook, so they might clean house some of these guys like Frank Ntilikina, maybe Dennis Smith Jr. I doubt he would go in that trade, but maybe. But I think Trey Jones is a guy who can bring a lot of security to the Knicks, especially because he has the ability to play both sides of the ball. Could be a really good defensive player. His jump shot did improve. He did go up from 26 to 36% from three last year, so that could help him on the offensive end. But I think this will just bring a lot of security to the Knicks at that point guard position, especially if they do trade for Russell Westbrook.
Yes, with the 28th pick in the draft, now the Oklahoma City Thunder will now select Cassius Stanley from Duke. Look, Cassius Stanley was a little bit of a surprise. He could have, honestly gone back for a sophomore season, maybe improved his draft stock, but he's come out this year. And I mean, look, his strengths just basically jump off the page. He's an amazing athlete. I believe he set the combine record for the vertical jump. So it's pretty incredible. Catch and shoot wise, he's pretty underrated. So he has a developing, jumper or 3-point jumper. Defensively, he has the tools to be a pretty solid defender at the wing and guard, wings at the next level. And then, as long as he can add a little bit of strength, he should be projected to be a very good defender. And then offensively, catch and shoot, he should be good playing off ball with a guy like Shea. And it's just, again, it's another piece to the Thunder who are, have the potential to get so many over the next, 5 to 7 years. They have the potential to get so many players and add so many guys for this rebuild. And I think Cassius Stanley will fit nicely with the team and moving forward.
So
With the oh, my bad.
Oh, no, go ahead.
It's not my pick though, is it?
Oh, okay, I'll go. So with the 29th pick, the Toronto Raptors, I cannot believe I'm saying this right now. They should select Cole Anthony, the 29th pick, and here is why. The Raptors are spiraling down to irrelevancy as we speak. Sure, they have the Toronto market. They have great role pieces, but they're losing a lot of guys. Serge Ibaka is leaving. We're not really sold on Pascal Siakam yet. I know some of you guys are. I'm not. Kyle Lowry's aging. And Cole Anthony, I'm not the highest on Cole. We already know how I feel about Cole Anthony. But Cole Anthony, if he turns out to be just an electrifying scorer, I think that can really be useful to a market like Toronto right now, who's in desperate need for someone. Maybe there are better fits for this current team, like probably a Jalen Smith, Josh Green. But in this current situation, I think Cole Anthony and the Raptors makes a lot of sense.
With the 30th pick in the 2020 NBA draft, I have my Boston Celtics proudly selecting Karim Minier with this pick. Now, he's projected to go late second round, and I love Xavier Tillman. I love Xavier Tillman. But we've picked Jalen Smith so far in this mock draft. We've picked Jalen Smith and Killian Tilly. We're good there. So let's go out and get the best player on the board in Karim Minier. I love Karim Minier. I have a lottery talent. All right. If he can go to the right situation, and I believe Boston is the right situation. Now, listen, we need guys to either international players who are going to be draft and stash, such as Leandro Bolmara, or a guy like Karim Minier who can spend a year in the G League. And what Karim Minier needs is he needs to continue getting reps and just get a little stronger. And he can do that in the G League with the Celtics for 1 year, and then we can call him up. I'm telling you, he's just such a complete prospect. At least he was over in Canada, and I think people are sleeping on him. But from a Celtics perspective, you can take a chance on a guy like this. You've picked Jalen Smith, who's a very safe pick, and Killian Tilly, who's really just risky due to injury. But when he's healthy, he's going to be an NBA level player. And you've already picked two big men. I'd consider RJ Hampton here, but I think Karim Minier honestly has more upside.
Thomas, why are you shaking your head?
I just don't see it with Karim Minier. I don't see it with Karim Minier.
Well, what about this? You have him 30 on your big board?
I don't know. Not inside my top 30.
You have all right, but here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. You have him high 30, so you can't tell me picking him 30th, even from your perspective, is that bad of value.
It's not terrible value, but there were a handful of better guys on the board.
Who?
Malachi Flynn, same position.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not taking Malachi Flynn over Karim Minier. And this take may seem like blasphemous, 5 years from now. Karim Minier turns out to be nothing, but he has the potential to be something. If he can get in the right situation, Karim Minier. Listen, I'm telling you, you just got to go watch him. He's such a complete prospect. He has a fairly high ceiling. I am taking him over Malachi Flynn. I love Malachi, but no.
That's a very interesting pick. That's all I'm going to say on that pick. Personally, I would have a couple other options like Malachi Flynn over a guy like Karim Minier on the Celtics team, which I'm not really sure if they want to take the risk of taking Minier. But with that being said, guys, name a couple second-round prospects who you believe could actually be better than some of the guys we just listed. Guys who are going to go under the radar, but you feel like maybe when it's all said and done, they're probably going to have better careers than some of even the lottery level talents.
Ooh. One guy. Now, I don't know if he'll necessarily be better than the lottery level talent. But I'm a big fan of Denny Avedija's teammate, Yam Madar. Now, Yam Madar is a draft and stash, and right away that raises a red flag because if you go look at the history of drafts and stashes, it's horrendous. There was no name that I recognized whatsoever. I don't know if any of those guys even played in the NBA because they were either that terrible or that irrelevant. So Ramadar could just end up as another guy that's like, oh, who was this? Why did the Celtics take, or not the Celtics? Why did the team take him? But I think he's certainly not a complete player, but I think he brings a lot of attractive qualities to a team. He's a hard-nosed, scrappy defender. He's someone that picks up full court and just has a really high motor, just is constantly giving effort on the defensive end. And then on offense, he's an extremely crafty finisher. He's great through contact. He understands angles really, really well. And he's just a really skilled finisher. He's a really good passer. He's great in the pick and roll. He loves finding cutters down low. And then the only real concern I have with him is his three-point shot. But he shot 81% from the foul line, and he posted some pretty good three-point shooting numbers for, I believe, the Combine or whatever he did. So Yamadar is, like I said, he's not necessarily someone I think is going to be better than the lottery guys. But in terms of the second round, I think there are going to be a lot of players. This draft might be one in the second round because the teams that have really scouted and have really done their homework are going to pick up on these steals like Yamadar and like some of these other guys that I'm sure you're going to mention. And I think that he could be someone that eventually could be a really solid backup point guard if he ever makes it to the NBA.
So let me go. I have two guys who I could mention. One of them is Kansas center Udoka Azubuki, who just finished up his senior season. I'm a Kansas fan. I've watched him since he was a freshman. And the dude has improved every year. The dude has improved every single year. And then he went from this role player center to a guy who could be the focal point of a defense. He's a really good rim protector. Offensively, his offensive game is not complete, but he has good footwork. He can finish around the rim at a high rate. And who knows? I'm not saying he's going to be better than the centers drafted in the first round, the Onikas of the world, the James Wisemans of the world, even a Jalen Smith. But he has potential to be just as good on that same tier. And I think a serviceable team that's looking for a center who could come into their lineup, produce at a high level, I think that if you're really looking for value, I think the value Udoka Azubuki provides at pick 40, pick 50 is higher than, let's say, taking a Jalen Smith or a James Wiseman in the lottery. That's just how I feel. I think he could eventually rise up in a good situation to reaching that tier. And I'm really high on Udoka Azubuki if he's in the right situation. And the second prospect I have who's going to go in the second round, definitely going to be taken early in the second round, is Peyton Pritcher out of Oregon. I think he's a really good spark plug off the bench for any team that requires a point guard that can pass a little bit, shoot at a high level, score. Just a guy who could just come in and get buckets at a high level. You know, he's not going to be a Tyrell Terry, but he can replicate some things Tyrell Terry does on the offensive end of the court. And I think any team that's looking for a backup guard could use him and effectively use him at a high level.
Yeah, so I'll give mine. I think Emmanuel quickly. I actually really like that. I mean, he wasn't in our top 30, so he'll probably be drafted in the second round. But when you look at his strengths, I mean, he's a guy who, if he's in the right, I know you can pretty much say this with all these guys, but like if they're in the right situations, I really think he could thrive. We can see him as a very valuable piece to a contending team in the future, depending on the team he goes to. But he improved a lot as a shooter in his three-point shot. And he improved really his overall offensive game just as a scorer off the dribble, and a shooter. He's a really good free throw shooter as well. So that projects he should be a solid shooter at the NBA level in all areas. He's a decent playmaker. I mean, he would be fine, as long as he's not the primary playmaker, which he wouldn't be. And I don't think he's going to be an all-star, but I just think he could be a valuable backup piece to a contending team if he's put in the right situation. He's a pretty solid rebounder considering the fact that he's a guard. And defensively, I mean, he's just a really high IQ, smart defender with some pretty solid tools that should project to the next level. So I think right situation, I think he could thrive.
Yeah, I'll go next. So we mentioned his name before, and I had him as a sleeper pick prior to this, but Malachi Flynn, you just mentioned him before. I think he's going to offer a lot of scoring ability off the bench for a team. He probably will end up at somebody, hopefully a contending team that could really use him. I know that's important because we've seen teams in the past, in the playoffs certainly, who maybe have a good starting five and then struggle getting offense off the bench. And if some good team finds a way to sneak him in the early part of the second round, I think that'll be a big boost for a team that needs offensive scoring off the bench. So at 6'2", I would offer him as a good, really solid pick in the second round.
You've got guys like Xavier Tillman and RJ Hampton who are going to go in the first round, but fell out of the first round of our mock draft. And a guy like Tyshawn Alexander comes to mind, great 3-and-D guard. But two guys that I personally, because I have Tyshawn Alexander as a first-round prospect, but two guys that I have in the second round, they're never going to be star players, but I just feel like they deserve more recognition. One being Nick Richards. He's a phenomenal rim protector. He's got a 7'5" wingspan, solid hops, great instincts, and he can defend in space too. He can defend against the pick and roll. He's not a James Wiseman where he can protect the rim and he's going to get cooked in the pick and roll. Offensively, he's going to play a fairly limited role. He showed a nice mid-range jumper. He doesn't have the 3-point range yet, but he can be a solid pick and roll guy. He can finish dunks, finish inside. So I look at him as a piece, for a team maybe like the Golden State Warriors looking for a rim protector, a guy that can come off the bench and be a rim protector. And the second guy that I'm going to mention is Nate Hinton. He is a spectacular defender because he has just one of the highest motors in the draft. He's one of the best team defenders in the draft. He's got the length. He's got those physical tools. As a rebounder, he's insane. He's not Dennis Rodman. I'm not comparing him to Dennis Rodman, but he, as a rebounder, reminds me of Dennis Rodman. He's a shooting guard who averaged near 9 rebounds per game in college just because his motor is off the charts. It's probably the highest in this draft. Offensively, he is fairly limited. Really, the only thing he has to bank on is a questionable 3-point shot. So that definitely does scare me because I feel like if you have no offensive skill set, you're really going to have trouble getting minutes in the league. But if he can just get a capable 3-point shot, I could see him being like an energy guy, lockdown defender off the bench.
What were you going to say, Pranav?
Go ahead.
One guy that I've kind of been getting fond on that I wasn't really a big fan of, but watching some more tape, looking back on it, he's kind of rising on my board a little bit. Jamias Ramsey, Texas Tech shooting guard, just an absolute flamethrower. I know you don't like it, Aiden, but he shot 42% from 3. He's got some of the best footwork in the draft. He's a lethal scorer. He's got that kind of J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters not mentality in a way, and not like he's not like an idiot like those guys are, but in terms of
respectfully,
yeah, he's not a question. Anyways, he's not afraid to shoot. He could be 0 for 10 and continue shooting, and I know that doesn't necessarily sound like a good thing, but believe me, it is. This kid has never-ending confidence, and then on the defensive side, he's extremely athletic. He's got a long wingspan. And he wasn't the most attentive player. He didn't give a lot of effort on that end of the court. But I look at the athleticism, I look at the length, and I look at when he was locked in on that side of the ball. And he was good. He was a good defender. And I think at the NBA level, a microwave scorer who can play some defense is valuable. That's a valuable asset. And he can play without the ball as well. He's a great catch and shoot player as well. I think that a guy like that has value in the NBA.
So we're gonna break. Breaking news on the podcast. I think this is our first time breaking news on the podcast. But James Harden has just requested a trade out of Houston. He had a chance to be the first $50 million a year player in the NBA, and he sent a message to the Houston Rockets saying, "Get me to Brooklyn." So that's gonna be really interesting to see if Brooklyn actually constructs this super team. I know Christian's going to be pissed since his Knicks are in town, and Brooklyn's going to be the team of New York if that happens. But I'm going to ask
they already are.
Yeah.
Experts,
I think they have been for a while.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ever since they signed Katie and Kyrie, it was out of question. Yeah. Sorry, Christian, in the nicest way possible.
That's all right. We haven't made the playoffs since 2013. We deserve it.
I'm going to ask my two draft experts, Thomas and Aiden, here real quick. What's a player that comes to mind that's going to be picked way higher than they should be? To me, what comes to mind is a guy like Vernon Carey, who wasn't impressive at all at Duke, to me. He's going to be picked way higher. And Will and Christian can chime in on this one as well. Which player do you think is going to be drafted way before they actually should be?
So I'm not. Don't get me started on Isaac Okoro. I could go on a long rant. I'm not going to do that again. I already roasted him on the last podcast. It's not going to happen again. But one guy that really comes to mind for me is Precious Achiuwa. Now, Precious Achiuwa, I'm sorry, but outside of your energy, and yeah, it's cool. You give a ton of effort, props to you. But in terms of your basketball skill, where is it? I can't find it. He has no talent. Yeah, I mean, he's got the athletic tools. Don't get me wrong. He's got the athletic tools. He can finish inside. He's a versatile defender. But in terms of actual basketball skill, it's not there. It's non-existent. He shot, I want to say, 59% from the foul line, 25, that might be generous, percent on floaters, and 30% on all jumpers, period. Mid-range, three-point line, elbow shots, doesn't matter. He has no talent outside of his athleticism and energy. None at all. And some teams are like, oh yeah, we're interested in taking him in the lottery. What? Why? I wouldn't pick him in the first round. I would not take him in the first round whatsoever. And I mean, maybe a team that has a good development staff can figure out that shot, can, take that raw athleticism and try to make something out of it. But I don't get the Precious Achiuwa hype at all. He's just untalented. I'm sorry if he's watching this, but he's just not talented.
Well, Thomas, I mean, again, he roasted Isaac Okoro. I was watching that. He took the words right out of my mouth with Isaac Okoro and Precious Achiuwa. Those would be my top two picks. But a couple guys just come to mind here. One, James Wiseman. I'm not a big fan of James Wiseman. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to hit his ceiling. His floor is fairly high, but for the player that I know it's tough to evaluate players before they get drafted, but this is a dude who's projected to go top 3. I mean, seriously, I don't see it at all with him. In fact, I don't even think he's the best or the second best big man in this draft class. I'm taking Poku and Okongwu over him. I know Poku has some potential to be a small forward if he really hits the ceiling, but he's a big man right now. Another guy that comes to mind is Zeke Naji. Again, I think he could be a good energy guy off the bench, kind of similar to Precious. They're not really, their play styles aren't exactly this game. I love Zeke's motor. I love his rebounding. I love his touch inside, and he's got some shooting potential, but he's getting buzz in the 20s, and I have him late 40s on my big board. I just think when you look at his positives, it's great, but then his negatives, I mean, it's black and white. Like, you have to look at this. He turns the ball over a ton. At the moment, he just can't shoot. He's a terrible defender in space. And for him to be getting 20s buzz, listen, he can be a solid contributor off the bench for a team, but 20s, that's way too high. So yeah, those are the two guys that mainly come to mind for me.
Yeah, I think that's gonna do it. Unless you guys have anything.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can give one quick one. I guess I think this was my overrated prospect a couple weeks ago, but I'll just mention it again because I kind of agree with what you guys are saying. But mine would probably be R.J. Hampton. Both him and Cole Anthony. I see them as like later first round picks at best.
Hey, they're overtime's best friend. They're overtime's best friend. They
really interesting. All right, well it's perfectly. Anyways, but yeah, R.J. Hampton, Cole Anthony, both of them. But I can touch on R.J. Hampton more. He's a guy that's projected to go, some people think, in the lottery, and I really don't see that, especially considering it's a very relatively guard-heavy draft class, and I don't see R.J. Hampton on the level of a Tyrell Terry or a Kyra Lewis. I just don't see him on the level of those guys. I think he's a step down from them. When you look at his positives, it's really like finishing and athleticism, and that's cool, but you need more to be worthy, I think, of a lottery pick in the draft. Especially with who's drafting at the late lottery. I don't see any of those teams why they should really take a chance on RJ Hampton. Again, athletically he's cool, but shooting wise, mechanically his shot doesn't look that great. And maybe he'll improve it, and for his sake, he kind of has to be a productive player in the league. But it's definitely a concern. Defensively, there's really not that much there. Playmaking, he's pretty erratic. And I believe I said this a week or two ago, but he'll take really difficult shots that like an Anthony Edwards or a LaMelo Ball can take, but at least Ball and Edwards can make those shots. Like they've shown the ability to make those shots. RJ Hampton consistently cannot make those shots, those kind of difficult shots that he attempts at all. So he has to really just take those kind of like fadeaways in the lane out of his game, just if he wants to be a solid player in the league. So, late first round, second round, I'm perfectly fine with that. But lottery, I just don't see it.
So yeah, that concludes our NBA draft, guys. When you go and watch the draft on Wednesday night, do not expect this order to come to life. It will not. It will not, because
James Wiseman's probably going to go too.
The teams are not.
Yeah.
Onyeka Okongwu is not going to go too, even though I believe he should if the Warriors want to draft a big. But do not take what we said for this draft. My computer is about to die. But do not take what we're gonna when we watch the draft Wednesday. Do not take this draft and think it's gonna happen completely. That's gonna conclude this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm out for now. Peace.
Is this the dagger?